Welcome. I'm Reena Agarwal, Robert E. McDonough Professor of Finance and Director of the Psaros Center for Financial Markets and Policy here at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, located in Washington, D.C. The Psaros Center for Financial Markets and Policy is the preeminent destination, providing unbiased expertise at the intersection of finance and policy. By driving solutions-oriented discussions, conducting research on key global market issues, and engaging our students. We are excited to have some of our Georgetown students interview our distinguished fellows to learn more about their successful careers and their involvement with the Psaros Center. Today, we are pleased to welcome Mr. Rostin Behnam to the Psaros Center as a distinguished fellow. The recording of these interviews will be available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Rostin Behnam, former chair of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Mr. Behnam has been a keynote speaker multiple times at our Financial Markets Quality Conference, and he's a graduate of Georgetown. I'm going to hand it over to one of our fantastic Psaros Fin Policy scholars, Kelly Grace Richardson. Kelly Grace is an undergraduate student at Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Kelly Grace is going to introduce herself, but I should mention she's one of our Fin Policy scholars, and she participated in the Psaros Center's our inaugural Fin Policy trek. With that, Kelly Grace, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal, and it is great to be here with you today, Mr. Behnam. A brief way of intro, I'm a senior at Georgetown in the McDonough School of Business, double majoring in finance and management, and I have a minor in government and currently work with the Psaros Center as an assistant. But for us to start today, I would love if you could give us a little background on your career in public service and what made you choose public service to begin with.
Thanks, Kelly Grace. Really important question. And as I think about my time since graduating from university, I've always had a desire to work in public service, to give back to my country. And I think that was going to take shape in a couple different forms. But after some time in private markets as a trader, I thought to myself, I'd like to pursue public service in different forms. So for my first job in public service was actually after receiving a law degree. And I worked at the Attorney General's office in New Jersey within the Bureau of Securities. And then more recently, I spent nearly 14 years in Washington as both a counsel in the United States Senate, working for the now retired Senator from Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, and then most recently leaving the CFTC as chair and commissioner for nearly 7 years. And it's been a very interesting journey over the more than 14 years, but being in public service obviously is a great joy and something that I take very seriously and very proud of, being able to give back to my country, both at the state level and the federal level, but really being at the intersection of two things I care about very deeply, policy and financial markets. And having some experience in the private sector and bringing that experience to Washington over the past nearly 14 years has been an incredible opportunity, both from my time in the Senate, but of course, most recently at the CFTC, with so much changing in financial markets, so many new participants in our markets, and so much disruption from traditional rules and what we know to be financial markets, to be at the middle of that and to be engaging with the Psaros Center, with members of Congress and other regulators across the globe has been a real honor and privilege. And I think that has been an inspiration for me to be a part of that. And hopefully, as young students think about the future, they're going to think about public service as a real opportunity to develop themselves professionally, but more importantly, to give back to their country.
It sounds like you've had quite the extensive background in various different types of positions. So I'm very curious, what compelled you to join the Psaros Center as a distinguished fellow?
As Reena pointed out, I've been very fortunate to participate in the financial markets quality conferences for a number of years. And what I think is so unique and distinguishes the Psaros Center from any other institution, quite frankly, across the globe, is the intersection of financial markets and policy. Obviously, being located in Washington, D.C., at the center of policymaking for the country, but really focused on unbiased, policymaking, research-driven, data-driven policy around financial markets. I think this was extremely important for me to be a part of. And as I thought about my next steps after the CFTC and being in this policy role, it became, in my view, a very natural fit where you had convenings of great speakers, both in the private sector and the public sector. And again, unbiased, data-driven research that's really trying to bridge the gap between policymakers and the challenges that they face every day, whether it's lawmakers or regulators themselves, and what's actually going on in the real markets. This is such a significant divide, and it needs to be bridged by institutions like Georgetown within the McDonough School. And really focusing on these specific issues, I think, is a huge benefit, not only for financial markets, regulators, and lawmakers, but for the country as well.
We are beyond thrilled to have you as a distinguished fellow here, so thank you for being part of it. And I really wanted to highlight what you said about it being an unbiased source of information, and that's absolutely what it has been for me so far working with the center. So I'm excited to see what you do with your time here. More on a personal note, though, I would love to hear what is one thing about you that you would like the students of Georgetown and beyond to know.
I think there's probably a lot of things that I'm looking forward to getting to know the students over the next year for sure. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't say the one thing I would love them to know and want them to know is that I'm a Hoya myself. I graduated from 2000 in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I think as you and your fellow students are learning so many different things and experiencing so many different things in academia and in Washington on campus, I've been in your shoes. I've had the benefit of being on campus and seeing great speakers and great teachers come through, and maybe perhaps just a little bit I can pay it forward for all of those great times I had almost 25 years ago and what I benefited from being a student at Georgetown. Is such a privilege to be in the nation's capital at the center, the epicenter of so much of what happens in terms of course, policy, regulation, and lawmaking, and at such an interesting time in our country, specifically with respect to finance and financial markets. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity, hopefully, for me to interact with students, get to know them a little bit better, and share some of the experiences I had as a student, and hopefully, guide and help them think about what their career will look like after Georgetown.
That is absolutely wonderful and exactly what we're all hoping to gain from you as well. Speaking to the point of what's going on in today's markets and the global economy at a larger scale. Over the past couple weeks, we've seen quite a few major global events. So the release of DeepSeek, to the potential tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and the tariffs on China, and how everything is definitely in a shifting phase. And so I'm curious as to which key trends or shifts in the global economy today that you believe will be most important for the next generation to both watch and also understand.
So it's a really important question. And I think these geopolitical events and these events that they're seeing occurring, whether it's abroad or domestically, geopolitics, domestic policy, macroeconomic issues, they've been going on as long as markets have been around. And they've always had an impact on financial markets. I think over time, financial markets have been built through regulation, through policy, through discourse to be resilient and strong. And I think we've seen that over the past 4 years, whether it was COVID, some recent geopolitical events in the past couple of years, but then as you pointed out, whether it was a number of things that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, DeepSeek, tariffs, and whatnot. Ultimately, it is being driven by so many different events that are driving financial markets, prices, and disruption in technology. And I think that's really going to be an area of interest, I think, for me, is to see how technology continues to disrupt markets, gives more people access to markets as we see these events drive prices and drive a volatility in markets. I think overall market structure and market reform is always something top of mind that needs to be thought about and thought through by academia, by policymakers and lawmakers, and by stakeholders, market participants themselves. But it has been a very interesting series of events that we've seen since the election. Elections, of course, always have consequences as we're seeing a new administration come in with new policies, and ultimately how are markets going to absorb those policies through price discovery, but ultimately also risk management and capital allocation. So really interesting times ahead. technology will be the driver of so much that we see for the next generation of how markets trade, of how markets react to external events, and ultimately, I think how we as policymakers, former policymakers, students, and thought leaders in the space think about what we need and how we need to drive policy going forward.
Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Still looking towards the future, I'd love to understand what sort of projects you are thinking about working on as part of your involvement with the Psaros Center.
So my experience at the CFTC has been really interesting because of this intersection with technology disruption in sort of traditional finance and traditional financial market policy. So much has emerged in the past couple of years around new products, new participants, access from retail investors. And then, as you pointed out in your previous question, so many external events impacting markets and creating a need for risk management markets and capital formation markets as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations, and the FMQ has had them over the past couple of years about this lag between how markets are moving so quickly and how policy tends to be a little bit behind and always needing to catch up. And we've seen, I think, a lot of frustrated market participants, but ultimately we have to be very concerted in how we move as a collective group of policymakers and regulators and academics, and engaging in a way that's cautious and careful, but ultimately making sure that we're moving the ball forward. This is why the Psaros Center is a perfect location, this bridge of financial market participants, policy, and financial markets writ large. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time over the next couple of years with a new administration, new views on financial markets, new views on access to markets, and this technology disruption that we're seeing, both from a plumbing perspective, but also from an access perspective, and of course, from a market structure perspective. So a lot to look forward to. I think a lot to be excited about, I think from a student perspective, but also for myself personally to be a part of this journey and thinking about these things with lawmakers, future regulators, and of course, students and professors.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, in terms of how technology does impact so many different aspects of our lives and how that in turn affects the research interests that you will be able to follow at the Psaros Center. So we've talked about the present, we've talked about the future. A big part of Georgetown, as you know, being a Hoya, is also looking back and reflecting on the past. And so I would love to hear what you're most proud of in your public service career so far.
I would say, as the Psaros Center is very focused, as I said, as you reiterated, on objective, unbiased, data-driven policymaking and thinking through issues that arise within the center. As I look back on my 7+ years at the CFTC and even more when I think about my time in the Senate, but most notably as chair of the CFTC, I was very cognizant of the role and the responsibility I had as chair, and the weight of that responsibility and the impact that my decision making as chair would have on financial markets and, broadly speaking, Americans across the country. So at every step, despite living in a very divisive environment across the board, and I think we've all experienced that, I did my best to stay true to being objective and to being an independent market regulator. And as I look back on the 4 years during the Biden administration, which I'm very proud of, I think I did a pretty good job. There's always areas where you can improve when you reflect on them, and hopefully I will think about them over the next couple months and years and improve myself personally. But that was a goal of mine from day one, was to ensure that I understood the responsibility I had as chair of the agency to make sure that I remained objective and did the job that was required of me, and that was given to me. And I feel very blessed and privileged to have that opportunity, to have had that opportunity. And I'd like to think back as I see those 4 years in retrospect that I stayed true to that goal.
Absolutely. It's the tricky balance between your own personal beliefs and what's best for the country. So absolutely. As you're thinking about your career in government over the past several years, what's something you're going to miss?
Yeah. So another good question. Really, I think it's the engagement you have as a chair of an agency, even as a commissioner, as I was, and as I said during the first Trump administration, being able to go to Capitol Hill, being able to go to the Treasury Department, even the White House, and then visiting other regulators and lawmakers across the globe. it is such a unique position to be in, and one of, great privilege, and something that I look back on very, very fondly. And being, in the middle of a very transformative time, thinking back, for the past 7 years between, as I said, COVID, a number of geopolitical events that have had, huge impacts on our global economy and shifts in sort of balances of power. To be in that seat at these very significant times, as history will, I think, tell as we move forward, has been a privilege. But to have that access and to be at the middle of these discussions has been really just, you sort of pinch yourself at those moments when you're advising elected officials or, other senior officials about what you're observing in markets, what your agency is seeing, and what we could do better collectively as a country to improve markets and ultimately improve the lives of Americans. So to be in that position, again, you have to pinch yourself almost every day, because it's rare you have those opportunities. You have to take advantage of those moments. But like we said earlier, you have to understand the responsibility. So those are certainly some of the things I think I'm going to miss of the job. But those are fleeting moments, and I think I took advantage of them, and I did the best I could to move the country forward.
Well, good thing you're still in DC, so you'll be able to still have the community there. To close, I have one last question that I love asking alums, and
Sure.
it's I know you were in the college, so it's slightly different than the business school, but what was your favorite class or, favorite professor that really changed the way that you thought while at Georgetown?
I was actually an English major, English literature major at Georgetown. I was an economics minor. Professor Glavin. I don't know if he's still at Georgetown, but he was one of my favorites. And he may not know this. He probably doesn't remember me, but he was a bit of a mentor. And I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but he had a very steady voice and very objective advice about, what I was going to choose in terms of my major and direction I wanted to take. He was influential in me studying abroad junior year, and someone who I just thought, like all professors at Georgetown, took the job extremely seriously. Was just a really interesting class where I dug in very intently because of, I think, the way he conducted himself and the willingness of giving and sharing his time with me. So if he doesn't know this and he perhaps sees it, I perhaps will recall almost 27, 28 years ago when we were together. But that's something I'll certainly never forget, and continues to have an impact on me to this day. And I'm sure other students, as you said, have had similar experiences with different professors. We're all very lucky in the Georgetown community to have the professors we do at the university.
We truly are. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And that is everything that I wanted to ask you today. But I wanted to thank you again for being here and congratulate you on being a distinguished fellow at the Psaros Center. It's truly an honor to have you here and returning back to the Hilltop. So thank you. And again, thank you to Dr. Agarwal for presenting the introduction today. But if anyone has any questions, please make sure you're following the Psaros Center for all the up-to-date information and look out for the FMQ information for 2025.